He has written Sushil Mantri, Big Bets, Big Rewards, and C.K. Pralad's Mind of the Futurist. Arun Maira has been a member of India's Planning Commission, chairman of the Boston Consulting Group in India, CEO of Innovation Associates in the USA, and earlier served in leadership positions in the Tata Group. He has written Redesigning the Aeroplane, Reforming Institutions, Transforming Capitalism, Improving the World for Everyone, and Shaping the Future Aspirational Leaderships in India and Beyond. John Elliott, a former Financial Times journalist, has written Implosion, India's Tryst with Reality. He first came to India in 1983 to open Financial Times South Asia Bureau, returned to India in 1995, and has reported for The Economists, Fortune magazine, The New Statesman, and Hong Kong based Asia Sentinel.com. He also wrote India and China, Asia's New Giants, Stepping Stone to Prosperity, and lead edited an anthology, Foreign Correspondent, 50 Years of Reporting South Asia. Sumit Chakraberty has worked as a journalist for over 30 years at Indian Express, The Times of India, By TV, UTV, and DNA, where he was the Sunday editor. He was the author of Master Blaster, What They Don't Tell You About Sachin Tendulkar. Now I would like to request the moderator to go ahead with the session.
Hi. Okay, so I think I'll use this. And very experienced and knowledgeable panel, so let's just get right down to business. I want to start with a new symbol that was revealed yesterday at Vigyan Bhavan, which is a lion with Make in India written on it. So I'd like to ask John, do you think it represents a new symbol, change in mindset, or is it tokenism?
I think it shows that Gujarat has taken over because the only lions in India are the lions in Gujarat. So it shows that that Gujarat really has taken over the governance in Delhi. That wasn't a bad start. Thank you. More seriously, or semi-seriously, I think it's fantastic if we can, and this in fact is stealing the title of a session we've got tomorrow, which two of us are also on again. So we'll rerun this on tomorrow. I think it's fantastic if India can move on from tigers and elephants. I mean, flagging tigers, roaring tigers, slow tigers, plodding tigers. I'm told, I'm reliably advised that elephants do not gasp. They do all sorts of other things at all different ends of the body, but they don't gasp. And you know, the tiger, about 6-7 years ago, Fortune magazine that I was writing for launched a blog in Hong Kong called Chasing the Dragon, and then asked me in Delhi to write one called Riding the Elephant, which is still the blog that I write. I took it over from them. But people can't get away from that. I think it's fantastic. I'm not sure what lions do. They roar, but I'm not quite sure what they do having roared.
In real terms, what does it mean?
I haven't a clue. Well, if you look at the image, I was there in Vigyan Bhavan when he launched it, and when it first came up on the screen, it was a lion without any words on it. It was just the cogs and the wheels, okay. The engineering wheel. It's engineering. And then the next slide to come up on the screen was it had Make in India on it.
Okay. I just wanted to get a quick take from all of you on this, in the sense, what's the impression that you got from it?
Maybe, can you hear me? Hello? No? Hello? Can you hear? I think tiger has been used very loosely. You refer to Thailand, Indonesia, and all those as tigers. We've been referring to them as tigers for the last 15-20 years. I think Modi would have thought that let's have a new animal. In any case, if you see the Ashok pillar, it's the lion on top. It's in a way going back to the animal Indians thought represented them. I think so. Modi that way wants to tell the world that we are a roaring lion now. That's my take.
Arun,
I just pick up from what he said.
Sure.
Yes, lion has been a symbol. It's the state symbol. on our Ashoka lions. It's the state symbol. So we talked about tigers and elephants, but if you really want to talk about India, state, our own heritage, the lion probably is an appropriate animal to put up there. But John asked the question, other than growling, what does a lion do? And I might say that it was Ashoka's lion, and Ashoka was about peace, it was about compassion, it was about caring. And so perhaps lion is, unlike a tiger, a beast in the jungle which is known for just being there and not being like a leopard or the other cats, sneaking and aggressive. Yes, they go and hunt, and if you provoke them, they shall. That's the contrast. So maybe you're trying to say India is going to be powerful, but we are also wishing to have peace in the world, like Ashoka.
Yeah.
You should become a speechwriter. You should become a speechwriter for the Prime Minister, because presumably he's changing his image too. I mean, that fits exactly what he would want somebody to say about his image. And the other thought I had, just a stray thought, is that elephants, which is the normal symbol of slow India, of course he would want to get rid of. And elephants really are rather sort of Maharajas and that era, and he wants to move on India on. But somebody needs to ask him.
Let me get into your writing now. I'd like to start with John again. Your book, which has come out this year, called Implosion, India's Tryst with Reality. A recurring word in that book is jugaad. And jugaad has become a kind of meme for Indian-style innovation, thriving in chaos, or making do with frugal resources. And here in the tech city, in fact, recently we had something called a jugaadathon, which was a jugaadathon. A jugaadathon was basically a hackathon organized by GE. So, the word jugaad has become quite the fad. But I think John is slightly worried about the kind of message it sends across, because jugaad also means lack of systems and processes and institutions. And so, I just want to get to that it cheapens the image of India as a jugaadu nation. So I want to get to what happened yesterday, which is, we put a satellite in space on the Martian orbit. And at the same time, in a blog that you posted, you spoke about the cancellation of coal mining licenses. So you have one example of jugaad, which an example of frugal engineering, and another example where jugaad has led to a chaotic situation.
Yeah, no, I would draw a sharp distinction there. I don't know where Arun Maira stands on this, but some people who I guess are probably friends of yours wrote a book called Jugaad, which came out, some management guys from America, wrote a book which came out last year called Jugaad. And that was simply some people who wanted to do a thesis, cashing in on a name. It's wrong to blur jugaad and frugal engineering. Jugaad is the negative fixing of things. You have railway crashes, you pay lakhs of money to the people whose relatives have been killed, and you do nothing to cure the railways. The Ambassador car is a typical case of jugaad, because C.K. Birla did nothing to modernize it apart from putting in a new engine. He didn't redesign the car for decades, and he didn't redesign the shop floor, the way the factory worked. Compare that with what Mahindra did with the Willys Jeep, which comes from the same vintage, the American Jeep. He reformed his shop floor working, he reformed the way the factories worked, and he produced a whole series of new models that went through the Bolero and onto the Scorpio and more cars. That is turning jugaad into frugal engineering. I would take another example on space. The reason why India is such a success that it got the mission to Mars was that America banned exports to India of high-tech space and rocket technology after the two nuclear blasts, nuclear tests. That forced India to develop its own technology. And companies like Larsen & Toubro and Godrej and many others worked on these technologies and became world-class. At the same time, in the defense industries, where India could import, where there was no ban, the American companies connived with the establishment here to sell in foreign equipment. What you then had was jugaad, without any attempt to get perfection, because you fiddled around with clapped out aircraft and used the spare parts to cobble together aircraft that could fly but weren't modern. Look at the defense forces. They're a typical example of fix it and let's hope that it'll all be all right on the night.
What's your take, Benedict, on the jugaad mindset? Do you have something to say?
I think, as you said, it's a negative word. And it's more of fixing few things which is difficult to fix. But I won't connect it to frugal engineering. Frugal engineering, you can achieve a lot through frugal engineering, and it is positive and futuristic.
I'm saying you can. I'm saying you develop jugaad and move on to frugal engineering.
No, you can't. I think the jugaad is just for something to last for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, whereas frugal engineering
the
is...
skills that are used in jugaad can be developed
So
to do
both
the
of you
frugal
have a
engineering.
problem with using jugaad in
and
a
frugal.
positive sense, whereas jugaad is used in a positive sense in most places these days.
Yeah, I can explain that.
Yeah.
The study of innovation, right? Jugaad, there's another connotation. One, as you say, is making do. Making do. There's one connotation of making do. And the other is you're making do in circumstances where you don't have much resource. So that leads into frugal. But a very popular understanding of jugaad is putting things together which you usually wouldn't put together to produce a function. That tractor with the engine of something and wheels of something else, and you did something which you could not do. But you took resources that were available around you and you made yourself capable of doing something. So that is creation. It's innovation in that sense. So there is a mindset, and C.K. Prahalad, of course, wrote a lot about that, to say, please put constraints on people, don't give them access to many things, and then they will be forced to be creative to make do, I'm using the word, make do with the things that are available in an unusual way to produce a result that they do want to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that is why probably GE was having this Jugaad-a-thon, is to get people to think innovatively, creatively, to produce things with resources which usually you would think are insufficient to produce the thing you want.
But to take an example in Bangalore, which is what I'm talking about, there's a family here called the Mineys who run Miney Engineering and produce the Riva electric car. Mr. Siddharshan Miney was the first Indian businessman I ever met when I came here in 1982. He held up a piece of fine engineering to me, which was really fine tolerances, and said, look what we've produced. And he talks frugal engineering. He talks how he develops factory systems to save money by applying the jugaad notions of fixing it, but fixing it with high quality and minimal cost. And it was frugal engineering, I'm just blurring my story slightly, it was frugal engineering which was used by Mr. Charles Gohan when he came for the launch of one of his cars with Anand Mahindra. And Anand Mahindra is a firm believer in what I'm talking about, which is you take the skills that you use for fixing it to move on to the frugal engineering. And with the Mineys, they went on to the Riva car. And that really is frugal engineering of using the small proceeds of a family company, which then had to merge with Mahindra in order to carry on, but to produce something original. While Ratan Tata with his Nano was simply taking a few nuts off the wheel and making it difficult to get into the boot and chopping an engine in half, I'd call that jugaad.
Well,
No.
well, I think I'd like to connect.
Sure.
I think, John, there is a connection, and it's about mindset, if I can bring it to the title of thing. We've got a mindset, okay, that innovation, one mindset, requires a lot of R&D, a lot of scientists, a lot of papers. It is a view of what will create innovation. We judge India and say India is not an innovative nation because how much do we spend on R&D? How many papers do we produce? Actually, if you have all the resources to do R&D, you may not be an innovative nation.
Yeah.
And this is a story to the automobile industry. This is a story to the automobile industry. When I started consulting in the US, as was mentioned, now it was the automobile industry which I knew coming out of India and from Tatas. So I and my colleagues, we did a survey of what are the resources available to the various automobile companies of the world, because There was a view then that you had to be a certain size in the automobile industry because R&D is expensive. Tooling up a new plant is expensive. So unless you're beyond a certain threshold, you cannot survive. So they were projecting the 6 or 7 companies or 4 companies that would be around in 10 years' time. And of course, General Motors was going to be around and Ford was going to be around and so on. And what I suggested coming out of Tata's in India is actually, and we'd worked with Honda, by the way, a small Japanese company then, they were our partners, that there's another mindset that I've got to do this. I'm going to get a man to the moon, like we said, to Mars, with the limited resources that we have, and I'm going to find a very intelligent, and it will have to be a frugal way, but an intelligent way to do that. And I said, look, I would start the other way. Those companies that have more resources are not likely to be around in a few years' time. And so in our projection, we said General Motors and Ford will be in big trouble in 10 years' time, and Honda will be amongst the 5 top companies. Yeah. I remember the journalists there were saying, which sort of mindset do you come from?
It's interesting. I think a lot of people here would relate to it because, I mean, the tech startup scene has, produced probably more innovation these days in the last few years than some of the big IT services companies. So I think Bangalore would relate to what you're saying. But I'd like to just move on to another point.
Sumit, one point about John's about nano not being very innovative. I strongly believe that it is a very innovative product, the way it was put through, technologically as well. It was collaborative innovation. The product was excellent. Product is still excellent. The way they goofed up is the marketing. And they stuck to the low value and they sold it on price. In fact, Mr. Ratan Tata agrees to that. When I met him for the interview of this book on C.K. Prahalad, he admitted that he wished he had worked with C.K. Prahalad on the marketing part. Because C.K. Prahalad believed that marketing innovation is as important as product innovation.
It's interesting, but I'd still like to move on to another point because we've dwelt on this for a while. I'd like to take this point up first with Arun. You worked with the Planning Commission and with the Boston Consulting Group, and you've worked you've worked firsthand with the challenges of moving from old ways of thinking to new mindsets. So I would like to bring you to the current situation. And you told me just before this meeting that you've just returned from China where you had meetings with companies there and the government. So I would like to bring you to the current in the sense the Chinese president was just here and he has pledged $20 billion, which was below expectation, but still a lot more than what we've done with China in the past. And now Prime Minister Modi is going to the US. Do you see, do you relate that to a change in mindset in dealings with our trading partners and investors? Or is there much more to be done to actually see these pledges come through, to see the flows of investment happen? Because there are many rules and regulations, etc., which prevent people from investing here.
Well, there are many layers to mindsets which would relate to that question. But the very central one, which we're relating back to Mr. Modi and his early actions, was to have a mindset that we must be connected with our neighbors and important to our neighbors. Whereas the mindset of the previous government was very much that we need to be seen as important by the United States and those big powers to do that. So there's a shift in the mindset towards who we are and where we belong, which I think is an interesting change to do that. Now, with respect to China, also standing up and saying, well, we want to do trade with you, but we do draw the line here. It was same with Pakistan. We will open up, but we will have our red lines and go. Now, you can call that also a different mindset about how you relate to others, that you are very clear about the good things that you want and also pretty clear about the things that presently you don't like in the relationship with the others. So I do see a shift in the last few weeks, and it's a very short time, it may change, my perception of the mindset of the present government with respect to our place in the world?
On investments, I think one of the phrases that Modi used yesterday was first develop in India. What's your take on that?
I think it's amazing. Yesterday, listening to him, I felt that his understanding of economics is pretty deep. He's not just a politician, he understands economics quite well. That unless we create market, it's of no use by attracting investment. So his focus was through FDI, by creating market through employment. So I go with that. I think double FDIs will work better.
John, first develop in India, is it reminiscent of protection for Indian industry in the Nehru era?
I want... Is this on still?
It's on.
Yeah, it is on. Is it? You can hear me. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. I wondered why he said it. I wasn't sure what he meant, because I think the focus of Make in India is slightly adrift. It's a great idea. And the 25 sectors and get to grips with them and all the things they can try and do. You don't just want foreigners to come and invest here, you want Indians to invest. I mean, the first priority here is not to get FDI, and FDI is a grossly overrated economic component of growth. I think one of the worst things about FDI is it's so easy to report, because any journalist on FDI limits only has to go up to a minister and say, is it 26, is it 49, is it 51, is it 74, is it 100? And whatever that one-word answer the minister gives, the guy with very little knowledge about what he's writing about can go away and write reams of paragraphs on FDI in retail, in the retail industry or other things. I mean, foreign investment is important for capital and also for technology. But the basic problem at the moment in India is that Indian businesses are not investing. They need to be persuaded that things are loosening up, that the government's working, that there's continuity. Obviously, the mining thing, which you referred earlier to, and I didn't refer to, is a big problem there, because it worries people that suddenly the Supreme Court can cancel contracts that go back 21 years. I think there's too much emphasis on FDI. It's great that foreign companies should come and invest here. They're obviously important. But the first thing is to get Indian companies working and to get bureaucrats to work to make that possible.
That's the point of these visits, right? I mean, Japan, China, the Chinese president coming here, and now the visit to the US. So
changing the image of India's foreign policy, which is fantastic.
India is back on track, but is it really back on track?
Absolutely. And then I think he needs to come back from America and stay here for a bit and get the government working and do some of the many things. I mean, I don't think it matters much, and I don't mean this at all rudely, Arun, whether the Planning Commission gets replaced or not. I mean, the Planning Commission's gone, as you were confirming to me just now. Sometime there'll be something else. But that's another point in the newspapers. Planning Commission is just 2 words. So easy to write about it. But he needs to come back and appoint ministers and make sure that the bureaucrats who are getting in at 9 o'clock are taking decisions. He needs to face up to the fact that secretaries of government departments' desks are getting overloaded with decisions which they're having to take too fast. There's a whole raft of problems which he needs to lead the solutions to.
I think he's getting there.
You have an interesting title for a book, which is Redesigning an Aeroplane, Transforming Capitalism.
While flying, redesigning the aeroplane while flying.
While flying, yeah.
That's the interesting part.
While flying, right. Okay. But in essence, you're talking of the need for new scorecards. I mean, it's not just about investment or GDP or growth. It's about putting in different parameters like sustainability, impact of society, governance, which right now businesses are exempt from. So my question is whether putting such parameters make the assessment of business so complex that it becomes like the Duckworth-Lewis system in cricket, which nobody can understand, and therefore it's very difficult to build a consensus. What do you say?
Yeah. So you're saying the 2 things. One is that maybe there's a need to reconsider what we consider important. And if I do feel, I don't know what you feel about learning to take care of everyone in society, more inclusion, as well as sustainability of the environment. If I care about it, then, as they say, you can't manage what you don't measure, then I should have a measure for it to know whether I am producing the results in those areas that I now care about. So yes, it comes to complications. I'm caring about my economic results. I also now begin to care about the other things. And by the way, I need to care about those things because my economic results will not come much longer if I don't care about and manage those things too. So it's inevitable that we have to broaden what we measure. We can't be having single measures and expect to be integrated with a system and to manage a system, which has got many things to it. Sustainability, inclusion, and not just economics in it too. So I do write about that, and then to the point, it is difficult when you're used to managing with respect to one thing and these other things start coming around. And then the questions like the one you asked say, I'd much rather not concern myself with those things, but I say no, we have to redesign our measurement cards and what we do, and we have to learn to do those things too. So this is exactly the point, and I'm finding it repeatedly that we are in a stage in the country and the whole world, we know we have to do different things and do things differently. But in doing that, we get challenged. And if I can relate it to the coal situation in India, you wonder why. People have been saying to us for the last 15 years that you've got to reform the institutions of this country. They're just too corrupt, they're too old, the laws and stuff. At the same time, business people say, we like certainty, we don't like change. So as soon as you start changing because you want something different, they say, oh, there's so much uncertainty in this place, we can't do business here anymore. So I said, well, make up your mind. There will be a period of redesigning the aircraft as it's flying, and you'll find a better aircraft on the other side, and you'll be more comfortable than being in India.
No, I didn't say not concerned about it. I was basically talking about the measurability of it. You run a magazine, Sustainability Next. You would have had discussions with various business leaders on some of these issues. What is the sense you get about the willingness of business to move to new paradigms which are being talked about now?
I think they are very open. They just want the system to be more friendly, the measurements to be more clear. I see that there's a huge people are ready to change. The sustainability, the large companies are taking initiatives. Smaller ones are doing it on their own. In fact, it's a misconception to say that Indian companies are not sustainable by nature. They don't want to do unless they are forced. I think there are a few books which say that Indian systems are sustainable by themselves. But I think going forward, if the systems become clearer, the government policies are clearer, the move towards sustainability will be much, much faster.
Do you have a take on this, John?
Yeah, I was trying to find on my mobile. I wasn't tweeting or something while this was going on. I was trying to find on my. I was trying to find on my mobile I was trying to find on my mobile.
You can pick up your notebook if you like.
Yeah, you can say. I was trying to find on my mobile an article that Modi has written, or somebody's written for him under his name in the Wall Street Journal this morning. And I had it on this earlier in the day, and I can't find it now, where he has a very concise paragraph about what he's trying to do, which is to make systems work better and make them work more clearly. I mean, it's clarity, it's not necessarily speed. If a company is told it's going to take 100 days to get clearance, they'll be happy, providing they know it's 100 days. It doesn't need to be 5 days. So you need clarity. You need set timescales, which are adhered to, and well, that's basically it. Those two things. And if you can get the systems to do that, then you'll get the investment, because people will come in, they'll know the problem. What they don't know at the moment is what snags they're going to hit, and that means simplifying the procedures as well. But it's not rebuilding the aircraft while you're flying, it's redesigning it.
Yeah.
which is
It is
and you can redesigning means it carries on flying and you do a bit here and a bit there, and the rest of it carries on flying.
Exactly.
Rebuilding it would be slightly more...
No, the title is redesigning.
yeah, yes. So that's what is needed. And that won't necessarily upset the continuity because it'll become better. I mean, the environmental, the challenge, I mean, let's move on a moment. The challenge is going to be one of the challenges is going to be in the environment area to clean up what is a pretty corrupt system at the moment, to simplify the procedures, and then to give fixed times, which is where they're beginning to do, for the various approvals that are needed. And to make sure that that is done without damaging the environment. And if he can do that, and that is redesigning the aircraft while you're flying, then he's got success. The risk is, and the environmentalists all fear, that in doing that, he's going to sweep away all the protections that have been put in place since Indira Gandhi's time. But that illustrates the problem.
To continue with words, redesigning, rebuilding, reforms, you, John, were the first to bring the word privatization in the public domain in an article for the Financial Times in 1979. So let me ask you, going back to what we started with, the jugaad mindset, the pros and cons of it, can you come up with a word or a phrase which captures a change in mindset that you would like to see in India today?
As an alternative for jugaad? Yes. Well, the privatization was when Maggie Thatcher was doing some denationalization and wanted to give the image of moving ahead and not having a seesaw where one government nationalized industries and the next one denationalized and then the next one nationalized again. So they took a word which, in fact, the Nazi government had used in Germany in the 1930s when they'd wanted to persuade businessmen that they were pro-business. And they introduced privazione, or however it would work out in German, with a Z in it. And to Google that, you need to put a Z in the middle, not an S. So she introduced it in order to give the image, very successfully, that there was a change. And I wrote an article in the FT, and I went to my features editor. I've got to tell this story. I went to my features editor, and I said, please put privatization in the intro, because in the headline, because it's in the intro. And the features editor said, privatization? Nobody will know what it means. And he put up a typically old Financial Times headline, which was the pluses and minuses of denationalization. Anyway, so that was emphasizing a change. I thought of your question, and I thought of Indovation. And then I asked a friend, Namita Gokhale, who was sitting here just now, who runs the Jaipur Literary Festival, and I think she's gone. She has. So I can't quite blame her for this. And she suggested Tarkib, which means Tarkib, which means solution. And then she suggested Tarkib, and I'm bound to pronounce this wrong, Nikalenge.
Tarkib nikalenge.
Yeah, which means some sort of implicit logical solution.
This is a jugaad.
For what moves on after jugaad. So I didn't catch that. That is jugaad. Well, that's the risk. That's the problem. But innovation, I would say, is frugal. And if I wanted it, I would say that innovation was moving on from jugaad to frugal engineering.
So innovation is possible in political system?
All right, frugavation then.
Okay. Is it possible in a political system that feeds on whatever, corruption, crony capitalism,
Is it possible?
In a political system which feeds on corruption, crony capitalism, or whatever, in whatever way you want to describe it. Because the essence of a change in mindset is
on corruption.
System, the underlying system, whether innovation or frugal, what was that?
Frugal engineering, frugavation.
Okay.
I hadn't written that one down, I just made that one up.
That is possible. Do you see that as being possible within the current system?
Well, yes. I mean, we're back to where we started, on frugal engineering being the way ahead, which is you make the best of minimal resources, and you then go positive for permanent good solutions, as opposed to fix-it solutions, which will then crumble. But on corruption, if you were asking about corruption, you can't do much about that unless you change the way that political parties are funded and elections are run. So I don't believe, and you haven't asked this, but I mean, if you want to, I don't think the Prime Minister probably wants to or even dreams he can stop corruption. He probably just wants to make sure it doesn't interfere too much with what he wants to achieve.
I think we are doing a lot of...
What's the phrase or the word or a sentence that comes to mind when you think of changing a mindset and a new India? Because we started with the word jugaad and we had a debate about it. You've written a book on C.K. Prahlad. You've written it's not exactly a biography,
It's not.
but it's more personal, many anecdotes in it.
Lot of anecdotes.
Drawing from that, can you share with us what you would like to see in a new India? How would you describe, or I'll give you a moment to think about it. Let me come to Arun.
Yeah, mindsets about governance is what you were, and then C.K. Prahlad, I'll connect the two has come to my mind. Mindsets about governance. You were talking about solutions to sustainability of economic progress, climate change, environment, and so. Last week, or the week before last, the Global Economic Symposium met 400 leading economists of the world and Nobel Prize winners and business people and others in Kuala Lumpur. And Pascal Lamy was asked to listen to as many as he could sessions and at the end to give his thoughts. And it was interesting. Here's Pascal Lamy, the global trade system. And he said some few very beautiful things. He said, I have realized, not in this session, but through my experience with the World Trade Organization and now in this session, that we have to find local solutions to global problems. We've got a mindset. If the problem's very big and global, somebody globally has to find the solution to it. Actually, all these things connect and integrate the environment, people's need for livelihoods, and so on at local levels. So we've got to get much more systems working at the local level, local governance and people thinking with broader scorecards locally about the system in which they are together. So that's a shift in mindset about how we go about solving problems. If it's a big problem, give it to someone up there and hope they'll find a solution. It will not happen. He'll have to go down there. Now to C.K. Prahlad, we did a lot of work together on innovation. And about India, he kept saying that in India, and there are lots of local solutions and local entrepreneurs with very frugal resources solve problems, actually. And the metaphor we had for them was fireflies. That they're little things, but they have their own light. They're not given much by others. And because they care, they give light. And when many start to rise together, you get a swarming of change in darkness. So another metaphor for India that we had, a very good one, was India should be the place where a lot of fireflies arise and together produce the light in the darkness that they want to have. So it comes back to innovation and entrepreneurship to encourage through governance local actions, more entrepreneurship, and locally more collaboration.
Should Rahul Gandhi have said fireflies rather than beehive?
Pardon me?
Should Rahul Gandhi have said fireflies rather than beehive?
He should have, but I think exactly. It would have been a better metaphor. Bees can bite you, a firefly doesn't do that. It just calmly brings its light for itself and for you too.
I think taking a point from Arun, CK's legacy is doing well by doing good. The very powerful statement that you can do well by doing good. I think that whatever we are talking about the poor today, and Modi's focus on the uplifting the poor man, and the bottom of the pyramid, what it does to the poor, it gives them dignity. They're not seen as the dregs of society, but gives them dignity, and also they are seen as the market for the industry. I think that rephrasing the whole thing, and end of the day, the purpose of business is doing good.
To sum up the discussion, we began with, can India change its mindset? You talk to so many business gurus as part of your magazine work and your books. Do you find traction for those ideas, or do you get a sense of frustration? What is your summation of this discussion?
I think India's never been positive as it is today. Thanks to Mr. Modi, I may sound like a BJP spokesperson, but I think he's changed the perception. Just 6 months back, there was so much of despondency in the country. I think we are ready to be led again. That's what C.K. Prahlad said, that India is ready to be led again. And I think the time has come for India to be led again.
John, I've been reading your book actually, Implosion, and I know that, I mean, you write elegantly, but you're also neither a pro-BJP person nor a pro-Congress person. You bring an analytical framework to, the India story. What is your summation of what we've been discussing?
Yeah, I'm not pro any political party, though a few paragraphs did tilt rather futilely pro AAP, but that didn't get anybody very far. I mean, the title of this session is getting down to business, can India change its mindset? And the mindset, the wish to change the mindset was shown by the results of the general election. I mean, a huge proportion of this country, well, 30%, before somebody tells me that's not huge, but 30% of this country voted to change the mindset of government. It's now up to the government, and Modi's got the first chance. AAP didn't get the first chance to change it. The AAP had a chance in Delhi to change the mindset in the Delhi government and failed. It didn't have a majority, so it didn't have much chance. But there is a mood in the country that the mindset is there. And that then needs to be harnessed by government and by business. So but the answer to the question is, can India change the mindset, is yes, if it harnesses the views of the whatever the proportion is under the age of 35, and the views indicated by the voters.
You've been on the inside track, you've worked with the Planning Commission, you've actually grappled with these issues in terms of bringing a change of mindset into reality, into actual work on the ground. Can you sum up what your feelings are about this discussion?
Yeah, the Aam Aadmi Party, as well as I would say the BJP, were getting a lot of traction in the last year and more, because the country wanted things to be different. They weren't happy with the way things were. They wanted, let me say, the airplane that they were all in to be redesigned. They weren't comfortable with the condition of the airplane in which they were. But it's a very complicated thing to fly an aeroplane. It's not, I want a different aeroplane, and so I'm going to have a different, and fly a different aeroplane. So here we were, and this is a conversation that I had with Arvind Kejriwal, because I in the Planning Commission look after the state of Delhi and some other states. So as soon as he's elected, it's my job to write a letter to the Chief Minister to say, can we meet? And so I knew him from before, so he called me over, and he's a nice man, you know. He said, something in your letter, he says, struck me. The structures required to run a movement are one. The structures required to run a political party are another. And I had just not even been able to understand how to make a movement successful when suddenly we are required to have a political party to compete in an election. And that's difficult. And then structures required to run government as the central part of governance is another set of things. And within 45 days, I'm from movement into a government. He says, I just don't know. So we need the skills to create the new institutions that we need. And to do it, as I said, this was a case of plane crashing because you couldn't redesign it while first flying the Aam Aadmi Party movement at the time. And so this is the essence of it, that Mr. Modi came in because there was more confidence that at least he's run a state. Yeah, he could run a government system. We'd be safer off in their hands for the time being, because we want someone who does things differently and the sort of things we want, which is be tough, the leadership question that you said. Please be tough now. We need some tough leadership at this time. And I think that's all the Gujarat model, which you referred to, really was. I think economists in the Planning Commission I found debating whether the malnutrition in Gujarat had gone up or down, and that aspect of the model. But the Aam Aadmi was saying the Gujarat model is things get done. And that's what we want, and that's what we are voting for.
Would you like to add something, or shall I throw it open to questions? So let's have questions. So very knowledgeable panel. There's a person there raising his hand.
Thank you very much for the very impressive presentations. I have one question for the entire panel. Last afternoon, when I was listening to the Make in India program, Mrs. Chanda Kochar of ICICI Bank mentioned in her speech that the import bill for electronic components in India is higher than the petroleum or the oil import bill. Now, if that is the case, as an ordinary Indian citizen, I would like to know, how did we get to this, if I may say, dire situation?
I can tell you, I looked after industry in the Planning Commission. That is one of our marquee industries in the sense of how could we have come to this pass? Okay, I'm going to throw in a few things. In 2000, the year 2000, as part of the WTO, the idea was proposed to the world that information technology is a great improver of everything. And the more that everybody has access to information technology, the better off they are. So information technology stuff, the duties across the world should be zero. So it is the one industry in which suddenly it's zero duty because, yes, it's a very laudable sort of thing. The Chinese refused to sign it, and they did not. And they, last year before, began to discuss it. During this time, the US, of course, expected that they had the strongest, and they did have, electronics industries and the IT-based communication industries in the US, that they would be ruling the world. It didn't turn out quite that way. The Chinese began to rule the world. So there's a point here to the Make in India that we have to be smart. Just leaving it open when you are very small, you'll get smothered by the big guys. And in fact, they want to make the rule so it's easier for them to smother the weak, if I can put it. And you've got to be smart. And the Chinese have been quite smart during this time, and earlier were the Japanese at their time, and so. And we, I think, didn't realize that leaving it to the free market and the invisible hand is always going to be good for everybody. It is actually good for those who presently have the power and the means to take advantage of more opportunities. Now, change. So we said, fine, we have signed the agreement, but some things are still allowed to us. That is, if the government is buying, then the government is allowed to specify that you must make in India. Okay? By the way, while we were doing this, the US and others were pressing to say even government procurement should be free. And it's okay. So you can see the pressure coming. And so we said, no. At the moment, we made a mistake in signing the full IT agreement. We will not concede our right to let the government choose where it is made. But I was saying in India itself, pressers coming on us to say, oh, but this is bad. We'll have bad stuff. So you're forcing the government to use bad stuff? So no, it's not bad stuff. We want the foreign guys to come and make it here good stuff. We're going to specify what we want, but please make it here. And it's public money. So as public money, I have an obligation to use it in the public interest, which is create jobs for the people. After all, it's the taxes of the people. So what's wrong in specifying this to do that? So there's an ideological mindset nata going on, which we have to be smart about also. And so here we are, and I think Mr. Modi picked up what the last government had made those policies, but was not feeling strong enough to, on principle, stay with them. And Mr. Modi has come and said, no, they're right. They're good for creating jobs here. Please come. That's why Make in India. He said, I'm not saying about an Indian company. You come and do it, but make it here. So on defense and railways, which are still government purchases, we have the right to say we will choose where you make what we buy from you. And so you've noticed in the industrial policy, they're talking about using the levers that we still have, which are in these two sectors, to induce people to make in India, to our standards, of course, the one we want.
I think, John, you have strong views on the lack of a manufacturing base in India and how it...
Yeah, I mean, just in illustration of the question, I bought a new Apple laptop when I was in London a few months ago, and it was assembled in China. And then I bought a rather smart wrap-round holder to keep it in, and that was made in China. And then I bought some clothes pegs. I don't know whether you have clothes pegs. I mean, wooden pegs that you shove on a clothesline to hold the clothes, and the wooden pegs were made in China. I mean, the range is ridiculous. The problem with defense is that the establishment works against this happening because, as I think I said earlier, it's the corrupt link between the foreign suppliers who would much rather make abroad and the establishment here which gets kickbacks, to oversimplify it, from those suppliers. There's a huge vested interest system that has blocked the defence was opened to FDI and to the private sector in 2001, and very little has happened since then. Not because the Congress government didn't want it, and not because of the, although you're absolutely right, of course, on the electronic side, not because of any other WTO or anything else, simply because the vested interests in defence didn't manage to block any change. And there's not much sign yet that Modi's going to be able to change that. He's trying, but it's very inbuilt. I mean, there is so much pressure within the system to stop stuff being made here. I heard an example the other day of a guy who wanted to buy a machine, and I'm not going to be precise about it because it would be traceable as to who told me the story, and I don't want the guy to be being exposed talking to the press. He wanted to buy a machine which is generally imported into this country from Europe at 50 lakhs. It can be made in this country for 5 lakhs. Links between the supplier in Europe and the regulatory authority that controls that industry in this country meant that all the small suppliers have been pushed out of business in India. The fellow who made it for him, and one guy did make it for him for 5 lakhs, did it on the quiet, having had intense pressure from what I will loosely call the government, not to do it, because there were so many kickbacks being paid by the foreign supplier to the bureaucrats in this country. I don't know about ministers, but certainly bureaucrats, so that they could do their exports from that foreign country into India. And that's astonishing. I mean, I've been here all these years, and I've written a book on some of the problems of India, and I'm naive enough still to be surprised. I mean, that one really shocked me.
Anything to add?
Simple question. Question to you, Arun sir, mainly since you have worked in the planning commission also. And now we are firstly talking about skilled India and certainly decentralized education. And in future, it might be right to free internet for BPL families for accessing education. But since all the discussion has flown from jugaad to frugal engineering, which is certainly an iterative process in different hierarchies, I want to ask that in our academia, our system, the basic education system, aren't we lacking the jugaad practical approach, the risk management approach, taking the risk as fixing the things, and iterative mindset, like going one way or the other way in doing one thing? So how do you see the academic system currently, and do you propose any change for jugaad or frugal engineering system into the academia to improve the creativity and practicability?
Okay. Yeah. I think, it comes to social expectations also. In the education system, you ask any of the parents sitting here about their children who are going into school now and what they would want their children to do when they get into college. Okay? Things are changing, I know. But I know, as I asked this question recently, a couple of years ago, they would want their children to get into colleges which are seen to be the premium colleges. Why? Because from there they will get into something else. So there's a whole assembly line in the education system. It's not just here, it's happening in the United States also now. That you want to get into certain institutions because from there you get to the next step. And so you have in the United States also, by the way, people who are coaching you so that you can pass that exam and get a high result. And so we have here. So to change the nature of our education where people are going to be more open and more risk-taking rather than no risk, I want to pass that exam with a high mark, it's not just the education system, it's the clients of the education system, which is the parents and the students, whose expectations of what they want in life must change, and together the system can change. So this is a sort of thing which the government by itself should not change, in fact, and cannot change. The society together must work out. This is the redesigning the airplane, as I was saying. Many things have to change together, otherwise it crashes. So we are finding in the education, as we are working, Kiran is there, We worked in the National Innovation Council. We came to the question of education. We did introduce Jugaad, Tod more, we call them, things in the schools. So people learned how to put things together in creative ways. But that was like a side thing. And many parents would say, I'm doing it like a hobby, but I hope he's not wasting too much time. He better get back to his homework. He has to pass the exam at the end of it.
I guess it's also related to the opportunities that are out there, and with more opportunities opening up, maybe there will be a change in mindset. We'll have a next question.
I wanted to ask this question actually to John because I read his piece this morning. And he talked about judicial activism and about how it is actually interfering in a lot of processes in our country, including bringing about change. I mean, it can even stop change if it so becomes that active, because I think our regulatory system somehow seems to be failing us and allowing the judicial activism to almost prevent a lot of things from happening. I just wanted to hear your comments on that.
Well, I suppose judicial activism at one level is explain of things, and of course it started 30 years ago, or just over 30 years ago, after the emergency, I think, when people felt there was a need for individuals to have that freedom. But it's got ridiculous now, where judges take the view on contracts going back 21 years. The only cure, I don't think you can stop the judges doing it, the only cure is for governments to govern. The only reason it happens is for governments to govern. I mean, I used to always quote the example, which I think I put in my book, I'm not sure, of a High Court judge in Delhi when the garbage wasn't being cleared in her street, in the streets, going into her own court and starting a case in the courts, and then told the municipal council or whatever it is to clear the garbage. In fact, there's been another garbage case in Delhi recently. But it has got too far. I mean, the High Court, the Supreme Court took a view the other day on saying, chivying the government or the BJP, I'm not sure who's responsible, or Parliament, to appoint a leader of the opposition. They said, doesn't India need a leader of the opposition? Well, of course it does, but it's not the job of the Supreme Court to do that. Governments have not governed, and therefore the courts have stepped in, and it's got crazy.
I think she had a
Tax tribunal was told that it's unconstitutional. I mean, they told them that they can't do it.
Yeah.
There's another, while you're getting your authority for the environment, which is crazy. There's so many regulatory authorities already. You need the existing ones to work properly. You've got your mic now, Kiran.
next question.
Just my colleague and I were just talking about how this particular topic could have actually come up in 3 times in the last 3 decades.
Can you speak the mic a little?
In 2004, or in 84, 85, in 2000, in 92, and in 2004. All 3 times in the history of the last 30 years, a similar topic could have been discussed. When Rajiv Gandhi took over, when Manmohan Singh came as the finance minister, and of course when the Congress got the huge mandate in 2004. Somehow or the other, in the last 30 years of our work experience in this country, we are always about to do something, but we never really do it. Is it because of a lack of sustenance on policy, or a lack of stamina on the work environment and the workforce front, or a combination of both?
I think
I'll just finish the last part. Because my big fear is, and I think this is a fear a lot of us have, is that we may face the same thing going forward with Modi. Because we might have a great moment of joy right now that he has come to power, but going forward, will it sustain?
It's a good question to wind up this session with.
that we could get 4th time lucky.
John?
Rajiv Gandhi, I was here in 84 when he was elected. Rajiv Gandhi had a landslide election victory not because people thought he had the solution to what India needed, but because his mother had been assassinated, and that led to a sympathy vote for Congress. Whether he, which way it would have gone otherwise is another issue. He did not come in. He came in with an agenda for change that he believed in, and I reported extensively, but he didn't know how to do it. He hadn't got the experience, and he didn't have the people with him. The difference now is that Modi, as we've already said, has come in at a time when young aspirational India wants these things to achieve. He has got the experience of running Gujarat. Whether that's enough for him to adapt it to the Prime Minister's office, we'll have to wait and see. But it's a better chance than the other ones the other two examples you've given.
Arun?
And if it doesn't happen, then there'll be a mess.
And I was a year ago when there was so much pessimism, and I remember again at the Global Economic Symposium last year, and I was speaking there to an international crowd and explaining why I was very hopeful, taking facts that were already visible that India is going to be getting onto a better track. And so I was asked to write for the Globalist in Washington, where they were writing a big piece of why one should be down about India, and they said, put mine on the side, why you'd be positive. Now, why was I able to say that I'm positive? We have, as citizens in this country, and the Planning Commission did it for the third time, used the process, citizens twice before, and now the Planning Commission, a process of looking at systems and the scenarios. You can't predict. I cannot predict, because things can happen which we haven't anticipated. But you can anticipate the things which can make a difference. And if you understand those, then you can do something about the things that will make a difference to the course that you are taking. This is what scenario planning does, unlike the 5-year budget plans. So we did this, by the way, with the World Economic Forum in 2004. And we said that the policies that were emerging then, or the lack of attention to the things that should be attended to, India's growth rate will go up to 9% and will fall down to 6%. As they did. When we put them out then to say, if you don't change your mindset about what you're doing for inclusion and fixing the quality of the state, which you're not doing, you will find this. People poo-pooed and said, how dare you say India can ever go down? We are on a rise forever. Once again, 2 years ago, we did this time more elaborately in the Planning Commission with the inputs from a variety of people across India and across the world. What needs to be fixed for India to get more safely onto a good trajectory? And there were 3 things that we said need to change in the architecture of governance and the policies. And we are noticing that all those 3 things are being attended to now at long last. Now, once again, there can be political reasons, social reasons, communal reasons, which could upset things, or global reasons also. But we have to keep our ship strong so it will sustain itself, progress itself, even when there are storms outside these conditions. And I think I'm very optimistic this time compared to the previous times, that what I see the government that has come in doing is the things that the systems analysis said should be done. Whereas in 2004 and 5, what the government started to do was not the things that were essential to do.
All the time that it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we would like to request you all to sign the BLF board. You can